I'd consider myself a pretty laid-back guy. I'd say the same about most of my friends. This happened last year, so I'll get right into it. Spring break was supposed to be just me and my friends Jackson, Ariel, and Isabel camping on a secluded beach in Alabama. No crowds, just stars and waves. We got there late, later than we planned. We parked in the closest lot and began walking toward the beach. The place was dead quiet, no other campers, no fishermen, nothing but empty sand stretching for miles. Going to Isabel, who was familiar with the area, locals sometimes used that part of the beach for overnight fishing, but that night it was empty. It wasn't fully dark out yet, but the sun had started setting, so we'd need to set up camp quickly. Jackson and I began pitching the tents. Since I had driven, I had brought my dog Bean with me. He was a Doberman who loved the sand, so we all got a kick out of watching him run and roll around. At one point, Ariel pointed out a car in the distance, saying it had driven by twice already. I turned. An old, beat-up-looking SUV slowly rolled past on the narrow access road that ran parallel to the dunes. The access road was a little more than a strip of packed sand, just wide enough for one car. On one side was the beach where we were, and the other side was a line of shrubs. You couldn't really see the main roads from where we were. The car drove by and ultimately disappeared down the road. The four of us shrugged it off and went back to setting up, and by the time we finished, we decided to crack a few beers and chop it up in a circle. The girls drank seltzers instead of beer, which we made fun of them for. It was almost fully dark at that point. I can't remember who noticed it first, but that car that had driven by was back again. Only this time it stopped when it was parallel to us. The driver's door opened and a man got out. I could tell it was a man because he was really tall, although I couldn't make out any features of his face. He began walking towards us and the girls got nervous. Jackson and I told them not to worry, and we got up to go intercept the man before he could reach our campsite. Bean was already on high alert, so I told him to come with us. As we got closer, I started to notice that he was walking oddly. There was this slight limp in his walk, and he almost stumbled a few times. When we got close enough, Jackson said, "How's it going, man?" Trying to keep things light. The guy didn't waste any time. He immediately said, "You're on my property." He slurred his words a bit, and I figured he was a little drunk. I told him we thought the beach was public land. Keep in mind, it was really unlikely that some dude owned the beach. There were no private signs anyway. After I said that, the guy didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out a knife. Bean started growling in response to the man's body language, which honestly should have scared the guy off given how scary Dobermans look. But he didn't budge. Instead, he started running towards us with his knife outstretched. Bean charged at him and jumped to attack his arm that was holding the knife, causing him to fall to the ground. I yelled "no" at the top of my lungs as I didn't want my dog to get stabbed, but Bean somehow got the dude to drop the knife. The man screamed in pain as Bean bit his arm. I whistled for him to get off, and he listened to me. He ran back to my side but kept his eyes on the guy who was now writhing in pain on the ground. Eventually, the guy got up and started running back towards his car. Jackson and I ran back to the girls, telling them everything. By the time we finished, that SUV had driven off. The girls wanted to pack up and carry everything back to the car, but there was a part of me that was nervous about that plan. That guy was unhinged. There was no telling what he'd do, and I wasn't keen on walking in darkness with my hands full. Isabel made a good point, though, saying that he might return with a gun or something. I told Ariel to call the police and tell them where we were and what happened. Once the police were close by, the four of us started walking towards the parking lot with our stuff. Bean was on high alert, And I have to admit, the only reason I felt even remotely safe was because of him. I noticed lights up ahead near my car, and I was relieved. The officer stepped out to take our statements, and I was not ready for what happened next. He quickly pointed out my car's tires were slashed, and I was horrified to find out they were. The officer unholstered his weapon and told me to unlock the car, which I did. He opened my trunk, but thank God it was a false alarm. The officer was nice enough to help me with my tire situation. Thank God we brought Bean with us that night. The guy was probably a drunken lunatic. It could have probably been a quadruple murder if he had gotten his way. Finding a nice, secluded place to hang out is definitely an awesome time, but it obviously comes with its risks. Spring break. A time for beaches, parties, and making memories. But sometimes those memories aren't the kind you want to keep. I learned that the hard way when I was a junior at Wharton back in the mid-80s. What started as a spontaneous trip to Puerto Rico with my girlfriend Maria turned into one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. Maria was the adventurous type, and she convinced me to join her in Puerto Rico to meet her extended family. The trip was incredible. Her family was warm and welcoming, and the island was breathtaking. But Maria had one particular request. She wanted to take me hiking through El Yunque, the only tropical rainforest in the U.S. National Forest System. It was supposed to be the perfect day, until we found out that our chosen trail was closed. Maria, stubborn as ever, refused to accept that. "This is the best trail," she insisted. "We're not missing out just because of some dumb sign." I wasn't exactly a rule follower myself, so after a quick glance around to make sure no one was watching, we slipped past the barriers and ventured into the restricted trail. At first, it was magical, like we had the entire rainforest to ourselves. Waterfalls, lush greenery, and the rhythmic hum of nature all around us. We were laughing, sneaking sips of rum, and just enjoying the moment. But then everything changed. Maria suddenly screamed, grabbing my arm in terror. I followed her gaze and froze. Lying on the trail ahead of us was a mongoose. But something was horribly wrong. Its head was missing. At first, I thought maybe it had been hit by something, but as I got closer, I realized the truth. The cut was clean, too precise for an animal attack. This was done with a blade. And worse yet, the body was fresh. Someone had done this recently. Maria was shaking. I tried to downplay it, saying it was probably a hunter, though deep down I knew that didn't make sense. Hunting wasn't allowed here, and who would hunt a mongoose, only to leave it behind? Still, I didn't want to ruin the trip, so I convinced her to keep going. We pressed on, but the fun was gone. The forest, once beautiful, now felt suffocating. Every snap of a twig, every rustling leaf sent shivers up my spine. After about a meal, Maria admitted she wasn't feeling well and wanted to turn back. I was relieved. Something about this place felt wrong. But as we retraced our steps, we reached the spot where we'd seen the mongoose. And it was gone. My stomach twisted. I scanned the area, expecting to see someone hiding among the trees. And then I spotted it. Hanging from a low branch, tied up with twine, was the mongoose's body. But now something sickly green dripped from it. It swung gently in the wind, as if watching us. Maria gasped. Then, from deep within the forest, we heard it. A scream. Not just any scream. A woman's scream. Agonized. Helpless. It was close. Too close. Maria let out a strangled sob, and before she could freeze up, I grabbed her wrist and ran. We tore through the trail, hearts pounding, lungs burning. I kept glancing back, expecting to see someone or something chasing us. But the only thing that followed us was silence. As we neared the trailhead, we saw someone waiting. A park ranger, arms crossed, looking pissed. He started scolding us for trespassing, but then he saw Maria's face, pale, tear-streaked, terrified. I told him everything, every detail. His expression changed immediately. He led us to a ranger station, and soon the police were involved. But nothing ever came of it. No reports, no news, no explanations. It was as if whatever happened in that forest was meant to stay hidden. Maria and I broke up the following summer, and I haven't spoken to her since. But I still think about that day, about that scream. Because the thing is, we never saw anyone else on that trail. So who or what was screaming? And more importantly, was it meant for us? I could have been killed. My name is Anna. My friend Lena and I had been looking forward to spring break for weeks. We were two broke college juniors desperate for a change of scenery, but neither of us could afford the classic trip to Mexico or Hawaii, so we were kind of restricted to somewhere in the continental US. When we found a cheap Airbnb near Charleston's historic district, we booked it immediately. 5 nights of food, bars, and exploring. It felt like exactly what we needed. Plus, it was my first spring break above the age of 21, so I wouldn't have to constantly stress about which places were likely to snatch my fake ID. By the 3rd night, we'd settled into a routine, sightseeing during the day, hopping between restaurants and bars in the evening. I'm not a heavy drinker, and neither is Lena. So we were getting more enjoyment out of just experiencing what the city had to offer. Early that evening, we ended up at this tiny seafood spot we had found online. Fried shrimp, hush puppies, sweet tea, you know, that sort of vibe. The place honestly felt like a hidden gem, and I was impressed that Lena had been able to sift through all the touristy stuff to find something a bit more authentic. The good vibe didn't last, though. We were halfway through our late lunch when my phone buzzed. I glanced down. It was a number I didn't recognize. The message just said, "Hey." I stared at it for a few seconds before showing Lena, asking if she knew the number. She looked at my phone and said she didn't. I figured it was just a scam or something, but usually those scam texts say more than just, "Hey." Maybe it was a wrong number. I typed back a quick, "Who is this?" and went back to eating. Lena and I were laughing about something silly when another text from that same number popped up on my phone. It said, "Look outside." That one made me pause. I glanced toward the window next to our table, expecting to see someone waving or messing with me. But there was nothing, just the street with people walking by like normal. I told Lena someone was messing with me, and she agreed, saying it was probably just a prank. I laughed, but the thought of that really creeped me out. None of my friends were really the type to do that, but I guess it could have been some guy who had previously hit on me and was bored or something. Up until that point, the whole thing still felt harmless. But then another message came through, just a few minutes later. It said one word, "Anna." That stopped me cold. If this person knew my name, it definitely wasn't a wrong number. I gasped and showed Lena, and she reminded me about something I had completely forgotten about. On our first day in Charleston, we had entered one of those giveaways at a local cafe. It was one of those win a free meal promotions where they asked for your name and number. It had completely slipped my mind, but as soon as Lena brought it up, that's all I could think about. I hadn't given my number to anyone in Charleston either, so it made sense. I told Lena whoever was texting me probably had her number as well. Dinner wasn't as fun after that. In all honesty, I felt too out in the open. We paid the bill and decided to shake it off at a rooftop bar across town. It was packed and seemed like the type of place that attracted a younger crowd, so it was a no-brainer. After a few drinks, I was starting to loosen up, and Lena and I were enjoying ourselves again. But of course, that didn't last long. I got another message from that number, but this one was so much worse. It said, "That's a nice red jacket." I went stiff. I was wearing a red jacket. In fact, I was one of the only people there who was even wearing red. I looked around frantically, but it was useless. The place was crowded, filled with people laughing and drinking, but no one was looking at me. I showed Lena the message, and she said we should leave. The two of us started making our way back to the Airbnb as cautiously as possible. I kept glancing around behind us to make sure we weren't being followed, and we weren't. By the time we got inside, I bolted the door and double-checked every lock. We shut the curtains and locked all the windows too, trying to convince ourselves we were just overreacting. But an hour after we got back to the Airbnb, we started getting hungry, but neither of us wanted to leave. We ordered Uber Eats instead, picking some random burger place a few blocks away. The estimated wait time was 50 minutes, which felt like forever. We distracted ourselves by watching some dumb reality show, trying to shake off the lingering paranoia from earlier. Eventually, there was a knock at the door. I looked down at my phone and saw a notification from Uber Eats saying the driver was arriving. I was confused, though. Normally, Uber Eats would send a photo when the food was dropped off, so I wasn't sure why our driver had knocked. I checked the peephole, and yeah, it was a random, bulky-looking dude in a hoodie holding our bag of food. He just looked like a normal Uber Eats driver. I watched for a few moments, expecting him to set our food down and leave, but he just stood there. After a while, he knocked again and said out loud, "Uber Eats for Anna." I said thank you and that he could just leave it out there, but he still didn't move. There was a long pause, and then he finally said, "I needed to come out and sign something real quick." That wasn't right. I exchanged a knowing glance with Lena. She immediately pulled out her phone and dialed 911, mouthing "just in case" to me. Looking back, speaking out loud to that guy probably wasn't a smart choice because, after that, he started knocking more aggressively. When I didn't respond, he started jiggling the doorknob. When I still didn't budge, he started banging on the door, shouting my name. I honestly thought he was going to kick the door down, and I don't think Lena and I would have been able to fend him off. But then I heard a siren in the distance, and the banging on the door stopped. I heard the bag of food fall to the porch, followed by rapid footsteps running away. There was quite the commotion outside. Lena and I rushed to one of the windows just in time to see two officers tackling that guy in the hoodie a few houses over. We didn't dare go outside, but we watched as they put him in cuffs and escorted him to the back of a police car. The officers then came to our house, and we told them everything, including the texts. By some miracle, one of the officers had been patrolling just 2 blocks from our Airbnb when Lena placed the call, which explained how they showed up so quickly. Turns out, our cafe theory was spot on. He worked there, had taken photos of the giveaway forms, and had been following us since that afternoon, probably because we had written down that we were just visiting for spring break, making us easy targets. The cops' theory was that he followed us home from the bar and waited outside our house. When the Uber Eats driver pulled up, he must have convinced him to hand over the food, maybe pretending to be my boyfriend. The guy also had a criminal record, which made the situation even worse. The rest of the trip kind of sucked, and when it was time to leave Charleston, I was relieved. I still don't know what that guy's plan was. Maybe he thought if we opened the door, he could push his way in and do God knows what. Either way, I tried not to think about what would have happened if Lena hadn't called the police when she did, or even worse, if they hadn't been able to get there in time. It was spring break 2023. My friend Michelle and I booked a trip to Miami for a weekend. It was both of our first times in Miami. We were both 22. We stayed at some full house rental in Windwood, which was like a 20-minute Uber from the beach. We got there on Thursday, and we were staying until Monday. We landed pretty late in the day Thursday, so we just went out to some nearby bars for the first night. It was fun. The following day, we Ubered to Miami Beach to have a beach day. We brought the towels from the rental and just laid on the beach for hours. All groups of guys approached us, and we just reject them or whatever. But there was one guy who approached us, I guess specifically me, that just had this really charming accent, seemingly nice forward personality, and honestly, everything about him was handsome, from his hair down to his physique. He introduced himself as Will. He asked what our plans for the night were, and asked for my number, and honestly, I gave it to him. Then he was off on his way down the beach. He didn't seem to be with anyone. We watched to see if he'd stop and try to get more numbers, but he didn't. He was just walking away, looking at his phone, and eventually walked off the beach in the direction of the street. Michelle was a little jealous that he showed me more attention, I could tell. Later that day, after the beach and some bars, we left Miami Beach because it was a little too crazy for us. Definitely because it was spring break, but it was just a bit much. We returned to the rental with some drinks and snacks from a nearby store. He drank in the backyard by the pool, listening to music on Michelle's speaker while we plotted our night. It was around this time I shot Will a text asking what he was doing for the night. He responded very quickly, saying he and his friend didn't have plans yet, and then he suggested the four of us go out by us and win wood. Michelle jokingly asked if the friend was cute, but I wasn't going to ask that. We made a plan for Will and his friend to come pre-game with us at the rental, so they came around 8. The friend's name was Ken, and he was surprisingly good-looking as well. I could tell Michelle was pleasantly surprised. They brought their own drinks and left them on the counter in the kitchen, and we drank in the yard for like an hour. They seemed very normal, all seemed like it was going well. We eventually walked to a nearby bar. It was also in Wynwood. I have to admit, Michelle and I were already drunk, and Ken and Will kept buying rounds of shots. Things became a blur pretty quickly. I wouldn't say I blacked out, but bits and pieces of my memory became foggy at that point. Eventually, Michelle and Ken went to another side of the bar, presumably to hook up, so I was alone with Will for quite some time. Eventually, I had to go to the bathroom, but before I left, I remember him calling out, "What do I want for my next drink?" I replied back, "A tequila soda." When I came back out from the bathroom, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Will was like hovering over the corner of the bar, clearly doing something sketchy. I walked a certain direction to get a better angle, and I saw he had the 2 drinks in front of him, but he was hovered over them as if he were doing something to my drink. I may have been drunk, but that was enough for my intuition to tell me to leave. I walked away without him noticing to the other side of the bar, looking for Michelle, but she and Ken were gone apparently. So I rushed out of the bar and tried calling her a bunch of times, but she never picked up. Around this time, Will texted me asking where I went. I ignored it. I texted Michelle a bunch of times asking what happened, where is she? And then I eventually dropped the bomb that I think Will was trying to roofie me and that we should get away from these guys. I started walking back to the Airbnb. This was when Michelle texted back, asking, "Why do you think he was roofieing you?" And I said because he was hovering over the drink he ordered for me, doing something to it. When he texted back, maybe he was just on his phone. I tried calling her, but again, she didn't pick up. She texted back instead, saying, "I'm still with Ken, just text." I responded to her that I already left, so I'm not going back anyway, and I suggested she meet me at the Airbnb. She responded, "I'll be back soon." So I walked back. When I got back, I let myself in with the code lock. The door automatically locked after like 10 seconds. Same thing with the back door. I sat, really drunk and by myself, honestly worried about Michelle. But also, I feel like I was wondering if I was just overthinking the whole roofies thing. Maybe he was just on his phone. Either way, it was too late now. I was surprised that Will never attempted to text or call me again. Next thing I remember was the doorknob to the back door jiggling, and then I heard the button sound effects of the code lock, followed by a failed attempt sound effects. I then got a text from Michelle saying to open the back door. I went to the back door and called Michelle's name through the door. She didn't answer though, so I tried calling her phone, but she didn't pick up. I got a text back saying, "Hurry, open the door, he's coming." And this was when I really started to freak out. I yelled through the door, "Michelle, you're scaring me." There was no peephole or windows to look through to see if it was really her. I begged her to please answer me. She never did. There was a peephole in the front door, so I hurried to the front and looked through it. I actually felt sick at this moment, scared for my life because I saw what looked like Will hiding to the side of the front door. A million thoughts crossed my mind, like if Michelle was running from Will. I was still too terrified to open the back door without her confirming it was her. I texted her back that I'm calling 911 right now. She didn't respond. I actually did call 911 and explained, and while I was on the phone, I checked the peephole again, and Will was gone. When police showed up, I let them in, and within 5 minutes, one of them asked if my friend was blonde, and I said yes. He then told me that another officer had her in their squad car and was bringing her here. I was so relieved, but also horrified. When she arrived in a second police car, she had been visibly crying. She was very, very drunk. To the best of her ability, she explained that she had her phone stolen, and she was lost wandering the streets for an hour until someone helped her call the police. All of the texts I got from her number were never her. It was that guy she was with, Ken, or whatever his real name was. We also found her phone thrown in the pool in the backyard. They clearly took off the second I mentioned the police. We had to make a police report, giving every last detail as specifically as possible. They said they'd get the surveillance footage from the bar we went to. We also had to contact the Airbnb host and immediately cancel our stay and go somewhere else. It was a long, nightmarish night. Obviously, the rest of our trip was completely spoiled. It took a whole week before hearing back anything from the police, and the only reason they called was to confirm what the name that guy I was texting gave me, because it didn't align with the phone records for that number, which I had already figured out myself. He was using another stolen phone. After that, I never heard from the police again, which is absolutely sickening how little priority the police put into cases like this, even with easy evidence. I have no interest in returning to Miami after this horrible experience.